It was a long time ago, and a long time ago it was. And if I was there then, I wouldn't be here now. But I'm here now to tell you the story. And this is the story of a man called Donal. Donal McAllister as Naglinty Intrama, a man from the Glens of Antrim. And he lived a long time ago, back at the time when the ships had sails, and there was many's a shipwreck on the Antrim coast in those days. There was no GPS or radar or anything like that, and very few lighthouses even. And the amount of shipwrecks was incredible. They were all over the place. There was people getting drowned left, right and centre. Anyway, this man Donal made his living from scouring the beaches and walking up and down the beaches, and Thrachor, they called him locally, the beachcomber and Thrachor. So he would be going up and down the beaches every day, and he'd be looking for things, and sometimes he would find wonderful things, sometimes very valuable things, and other times interesting things. And at times he would find bits and pieces of machines or bits and pieces of wood, and he wouldn't know what they were for, but he would find a use for them. So this particular night anyway, it was Ichahauna, or Halloween night, and there was a powerful storm, a raging storm, a terrible tempest all over the land and all over the sea. In fact, the waves were crashing in and crashing on the rocks, and they were crashing so hard that the sound could be heard way up over the hills and a couple of miles away from the coast. And it's the sort of storm that would make your ears ring. It was powerful. So the next day, Donal got up and he checked the roof of his wee cabin, and thankfully the thatch and everything was still on the roof. But he knew this was going to be a great day for the shore, and going down to the Tra, a Cushna Farraga, that he would find lots of things there that day because of the storm the night before. But the storm was still roaring and there was still a powerful wind. Anyway, he took himself off and he went down, climbing over the hills and over the sand dunes, and he got down onto the shore. And he wandered along the shore with a keen eye, and he was looking in the water and looking at the sand and looking here and looking there and even looking up in the dunes. And he walked for a long time, but he found nothing. And he was really surprised, because usually after a stormy night there would be a great bounty to be had on the beach. But he found nothing anyway, and he was about to give up, and he spotted something white in the sand, and he walked along, and there was something sticking out of the sand, and he pulled at it and pulled at it, and it looked like a tooth, and then he pulled it out, and it was a human jaw. It was human bones and human remains. And this sent a shiver up his spine, and he threw it away immediately and thought, that's a bad omen. So he decided to head home anyway, and he headed home, and he walked down along the beach and up over the dunes. And as he came down the lee side of the dunes, the noise of the storm and the wind was quieter, and he was there at the back of the dunes when he heard music. He could hear notes of music, and he made out it sounded like pipe music. He thought it was a piper, but he couldn't see anybody, and he looked north and south and east and west and looked all around and could see nobody. But then he walked on, and the music got louder and louder, and then he realised that he was getting very close to the music, but still he couldn't see anyone. So he came along anyway, and the music got very loud, and he could hear it coming up from out of the ground, and he was so surprised. And there was a big flat stone, like a big flagstone, lying on the grassy, sandy area behind the dunes there. And he moved it over, and the music got louder, and he pushed the flagstone a bit further, and then underneath the flagstone was a beach or a spiral staircase, and he could hear the music coming up from beneath the ground. So he went down the staircase, down, round and round. The music got louder and louder and louder, and then he came down into a room, and there was a wee old man with a big long white beard and white hair, and he was dressed in a beautiful green suit, and he was sitting there playing the pipes, and there was a lovely fire burning on the hearth and a big table full of food. So the old man looked up when he saw Donal coming in, and he signalled to him to sit down, and he stopped playing, and he spoke to him in Irish and said, Píobaire ogat, ich dochud bia, eat your food, have what you like. So Donald sat down, and he wasn't going to eat any food because he was intrigued with the old man was starting to play the pipes again, and it was very intricate, complex, but very, very beautiful music. And Donald was totally under a spell of this music. But the old man stopped again and said to him, have some food, have some drink. Now Donald thought this was very strange, and he didn't know the old man, but he didn't want to offend him, so he ate some food and ate some pie. But he didn't like it very much, so he had a drink of something that tasted like beer. He didn't like that either, but he was so intrigued with the music he sat there, and the man played on and played on. But then after a wee while, the old man signalled to him again, and he asked him to leave. He said, it's time for you to leave. It's time for you to leave, sir. Is mehid ditch amachtanish a gunyusel, che susa stera, her and lack clecha arash achiroshe. So he asked him to go up the stairs and put the flagstone back where it was. So Donald dutifully obeyed, and he went up the stairs, and when he got up, right up to the top of the stair, he was back out behind the dunes, and he put the flagstone back where it had been, and he made his way home. But he noticed as he was walking through the hills that the wind had totally dropped, and instead of a cold, ferocious autumn day, it was actually really, really warm, and he started to sweat, and he had to pull his gansey off him and tie it around his waist and head on to his house. But when he got to his house, he couldn't believe it. The house was in wreck and ruin. There was ferns and nettles and weeds and trees and everything growing out of his house, and the roof had fallen in, and he was shattered. He stood there with a white face, and then he started to recover, and he looked over to the right, and there was another house there he had never seen before, a house he had never seen in his life before. So he made his way over to this other house, and there was a man sitting in the doorway, and he had a wee hammer, and he was tap, 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 and he was making a pair of brogues. And Donald could see by the way he was working and how neat his work was. Rona brogue einta slachwer agus kriknia and ahan roy. So he knew this man was a great cobbler because he could see the way he was making the shoes. He was very, very skilled. So the cobbler noticed Donald standing there and says, "Oh, a good newsel. Taris Jack, Tala Marvantan, Tashinta Brachalach, Taris Jack, agus Yoi through Joch." So Donald went into the house anyway, and he was given a drink of water. The man said, "It's a powerful day, it's a very sultry day. We'll sit here for a minute. I've never seen you before in this area." And Donald says, "Well, I've never seen you before." And the cobbler says, "Well, what brings you here?" And he said, "This morning," he said, "I got up and I went down to Chun na Jaraga, down onto the Tra, onto the beach, and I was searching for whatever the sea might bring in. And something really funny happened. I couldn't find anything. When I came back, I heard this pipe music, and I went down onto the ground, and there was an old piper there, and he gave me something to eat and something to drink, and he played the most beautiful music I've ever heard in my life." He says, "But I've come back and I don't understand." And he kind of signalled over towards his house, and the cobbler looked at him, and he looked at the cobbler, and he said, "That house over there," he says, my grandfather told me about a man who used to live in that house over there. He lived there, and he disappeared. He was a man who was always hunting the beach. He was a beachcomber, and he used to gather things from the beach, and that's how he made his living. And then one day he went to the beach, and he never came back." And when Donald heard this, he knew that the cobbler was talking about him. And he bent over in the chair, and he started to become very tired and the cobbler could see that he was getting very old. And the cobbler twigged, and he knew what was happening. And he called out to the children who were playing out the back and sent the children to go and get a priest to come over and give Donal a blessing, because he knew he was going to die, hadn't long to live. So the children went off and got the saggart, and the priest came over. And before the priest got to the house, Donal hobbled his way out to the front and went down on his knees to get a blessing. But just as the priest approached him, he turned into withered leaves and dust, and a big gust of wind blew him away. And that was the end of Donal and Thrachor.
Very good.
Gormagov.